It has happened. Russia has launched an offensive in the Sumy region. The first territories have been seized. The armed forces of Ukraine are controlling the situation. Kharkiv region is in danger. FPV drone terror for the first time. Terekhov statement. Pokrovsk is being encircled. The Russians are rewriting their plan of action. The summer offensive started earlier. All this and more coming up. Stay tuned until the end. Greetings. This is Ukraine Today. I'm Darina Hutskalo, and here are the latest events. The Russian Federation launched an offensive in the Sumy region and immediately took control of 4 settlements. This was reported by the Regional Military Administration.
Volodymyr Zelensky. As of today, the settlements of Novenke and Basivka in the Yunakivka community, as well as Veselivka and Zhuravka in the Khotin community, are under enemy control in the Sumy region.
Darina Hutsakalo. The residents of these villages had been evacuated long ago and there is no threat to the civilian population there. At the same time, the Regional Military Administration confirmed that the enemy is continuing attempts to advance in order to create a so-called buffer zone.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the defense forces of Ukraine and all components of the defense forces are keeping the situation under control, delivering precise fire strikes against the enemy. Our defenders are resolutely repelling enemy attacks and are not allowing them to advance deeper into the territory of Sumy region.
Darina Hutsakalo, the border guards explained that the enemy manages to advance thanks to small assault groups. Such actions by the occupiers are preceded by artillery, drone and airstrikes.
Alexander Demchenko, first and foremost, in order to destroy the positions of Ukrainian soldiers and, in fact, to weaken our defensive capability during their assault operations.
Darina Hutsakalo, according to Demchenko, the occupiers have been most active in the directions of the villages of Basivka and Zhuravka. He also confirmed the movement of assault groups in the areas of Veselivka and Volodymyrivka the day before. The Russians, meanwhile, did not miss the opportunity to crown themselves with laurels and claim major victories at the front.
Halina Etnos, units of the North Military Group, as a result of active and decisive actions, have liberated the settlements of Volodymyrivka and Bilovody in the Sumy region.
Darina Hutsakalo, the Institute for the Study of War has assessed what the recent movements of Russian forces might mean. In particular, they indicate a likely attempt to shift the focus of offensive operations. There has been increased activity. The intention is to use buffer zones in the north of Sumy and Kharkiv regions to justify expanding their claims to Ukrainian territory beyond Russia's long-standing claims to Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. By the occupiers on the Kharkiv section of the front as well. Near Vovchansk, the offensive has also intensified in the direction of Tikhe. According to Deep State, the first serious attempts began as early as April 13th to 15th. Over the past few weeks, the Russians have managed to improve their tactical position.
Halina Etnos. The enemy's goal is clear now. Having been beaten back in Vovchansk, they are trying to bypass from the left or the right. Accordingly, they are assaulting the right flank of the defense forces.
Darina Hutsakalo, military expert Valery Ryabik, asserts that the enemy has limited resources for conducting large-scale offensive operations, so they are focusing on directions with logistics that are convenient for them.
Valery Ryabik, the enemy, having built up a considerable force there, more well than around 650,000 troops involved in those offensive operations and their support, still faces certain significant limitations in available reserves to significantly increase their capabilities for conducting offensive actions, especially large-scale ones at this stage. And that is why they are forced to focus on such small tactical advances.
Darina Hutsakalo. Despite this, Kharkiv itself has come under a new attack. For the first time, the Russians used an FPV drone with a warhead based on an RPG.
Volodymyr Zelensky, this is a new, even more insidious threat, which indicates an attempt to find vulnerable spots in the city's defenses.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Darina Hutsakalo. This drone is dangerous because it combines the high maneuverability and precision of FPV control with a powerful shape-charge warhead capable of penetrating armor and destroying shelters. It is cheaper than missile weaponry, difficult for air defense systems to detect, and can accurately hit targets even in challenging combat conditions. The situation is also worsening in the Donetsk region. The Russian army has amassed large reserves near Pokrovsk.
They are now working to wear us down. That is, round-the-clock assaults by small infantry groups, sometimes frequently supported by infantry, oops by infantry with the additional support of heavy military equipment, including various two-wheeled vehicles and also artillery.
Military expert Serhiy Hrabsky explained that defensive lines are being built around key stronghold cities. For Ukraine, such cities were Pokrovsk, Mirnohrad, Kostiantynivka and Chasiv Yar. If the enemy manages to break through into this area, our defenders have to quickly redeploy reserves and look for new ways to hold back the advance.
If there is a need to transfer a unit from Kostiantynivka, for example, to that same Pokrovsk, or vice versa from Pokrovsk to Kostiantynivka, how much time could that take under constant enemy pressure? We already know that drones on fiber optics can penetrate up to 15 kilometers deep into our territory. And they've been operating over Kostiantynivka for quite some time now. This, therefore, seriously complicates the resilience of our defense.
Moreover, he added that as a result of the Russian advance, a wedge is being driven in, and the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration is being separated from the rest of the Ukrainian-controlled part of Donetsk region.
It turns out that we now have to consider organizing the defense in two separate directions, which requires additional resources, additional deployment of forces and means in order to establish a resilient defense there. Taking into account the wedge that has now formed, which needs to be eliminated, no more, no less. This is an extremely difficult situation.
The Russian summer offensive has been talked about for a long time already. Neither a truce nor diplomacy is stopping the aggressor. Moscow is preparing a new wave of bloodshed. What forces are the Russians amassing right now, and which regions could become the next target? You'll find out in just a moment.
If you want peace, prepare for war, or rather, a large-scale offensive by the occupiers under the guise of a negotiation process.
You all saw those delegates that they sent to the negotiations in Istanbul. They're really just some complete no-names, and to take that seriously, well, honestly, I don't think it's worth it at all. But fine, we all want peace, and no one wants peace more than the Ukrainian military, in fact. In fact, the enemy's summer offensive campaign has currently begun, and I wouldn't count on any kind of truce happening in the near future.
Meanwhile, in Turkey, the occupiers' diplomats are doing their best to pretend they want to negotiate.
Today, on the President's orders, I arrived in Istanbul to conduct direct bilateral negotiations with Ukraine without any preconditions.
In Ukraine, on the front lines, the occupying forces have launched active assault operations in several directions at once. It seems that before the negotiations, the Russians decided to throw all their infantry and motorized infantry reserves onto the battlefield. Oh, and the strikes. Prepare yourselves mentally for war throughout the entire summer and at least into September. It will be very intense and in some places unexpectedly so. Sorry, but it's already clear that the leadership has planned this and the negotiations are just a smokescreen. They don't want anything except a well-prepared offensive.
The Russian Federation will not stop and will not look back at the beginning or at the possible, perhaps even renewed resumption of the negotiation track in Istanbul, however you want to phrase it, or however you might wish to describe it indeed. They will continue to pursue the military objectives set before them.
An intensification of assault operations is being observed simultaneously in all directions.
They have just now begun their offensive actions. They were launched in all directions, and the main direction was specifically the Sumy axis. Indeed, in fact, 67,000 troops were concentrated there in total.
The occupiers have increased pressure on the Pokrovsk direction and on both flanks of the Pokrovsk front.
At the same time, despite the increased activity of the occupying army, experts and military personnel note that the so-called Russian summer offensive came as no surprise, since the enemy's creeping advance and pressure have been ongoing for at least a year now. So once again, the Russians are preparing for an offensive in the summer, preparing their reserves and so on. But right now there is no offensive. And in winter? What about in the fall? That's why I don't really believe in any kind of offensive. To be more precise, it's actually been ongoing since the end of 2023.
Regarding the so-called upcoming summer offensive, that's not true. The offensive hasn't stopped for even a single day. Ukraine's territorial losses in April amounted to about 150 square kilometers. Compared to these figures, 150 square kilometers, were given up to the Russians at the cost of personnel losses, which, according to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, amounted to about 45,000.
Putin's team rejects concrete steps toward a ceasefire, such as, for example, a 30-day truce. The real will and intentions of the Kremlin are demonstrated by military equipment, aircraft, bombs, missiles, and Shaheds. and by the hundreds of thousands of armed occupiers concentrated along the entire front. But Ukraine is ready for this.
How do you assess the situation at the front? Share your opinion in the comments. Hit the like button under the video and stay up to date with the main news. There are almost 425,000 of us subscribers. There's more to come. See you